Hello, everybody. Welcome at home. I'm going to use a PowerPoint, so I'm going to put my PowerPoint on. Thanks for joining. Little tech moment. I'm going to share this. Where are we? One second. I think my keynote is closed. Technical moment. Share.
Yeah. Your presentation's
Not there. So
close it.
So I have to close this
So
briefly.
just minimize this. So view. Yeah, so go get your presentation wherever it is.
There we are. And then I can't get back to, okay, that's good.
Okay, but you have to go back to Zoom, right? We have to be able to share, so go back to Zoom.
Okay. Zoom.
Zoom's right there. Yeah. Now share.
Okay, share.
Then your presentation. Share.
Thank you.
Now you're good. You can start playing it. Remember, you have to bring this down.
Wonderful. I have to bring this down.
Exactly.
That one.
And now you can play your presentation.
Okay. Thank you. Most kind, Jason. Thank you, Jason. On top of things. So, welcome. I'm going to, today, I'm going to go through, I don't have a lot of time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a talk, general overview of tea and the work I do in tea will kind of be intermingled during that. So I'll do a little bit of history, a little bit of manufacture. We'll talk about the different styles of tea. And then all the questions you have, let's do them at the end, because I may well be just about to answer the question you're thinking of. So try and keep your questions to the end. Last thing, if everyone could turn their cell phone ringers off. I'm quite mean when people's phones go off in my talks. All right, unless you've got an emergency or something, obviously. So, I'm part of a collective of 4 tea tasters. I have been traveling to Asia since the end of the 80s, and for the last 35 years, I've been there every single year as a buyer. So I usually spend about a month every spring traveling around the tea gardens and then tasting and selecting by taste the ones that I want to buy for our collection. I specialize in Indian tea, Nepalese, Sri Lankan, and also the teas of Africa. So I have a palate that is very based on the tasting of black teas. My partners, the 3 other guys here, who are all local from Montreal area, they specialize in China, Japan, Taiwan, Vietnam, and other tea-producing countries like Korea and so on, a little further orient. So between the 4 of us, we put together a catalogue of about 200 teas, which is changing all the time. We're very specialized in teas from one particular place, from one particular garden, from one particular day. And we've developed this niche market and this interest worldwide. We've won World's Best Tea Company a couple of times. And we've become very famous for this pure natural tea. So I'm not at this point talking about teas that are flavored with other things. Sometimes we take a tea and we enhance it by adding other things to it. But we've really made our name with this pure tea, just like a green Chinese tea, a selection of different green Chinese teas from one region to the other, and then going to those regions and finding the best tea of that style of the year. So this is how our catalogue goes. So it changes all the time because we follow the seasons, we buy small amounts, and then we deliberately run out before the tea is too old to be worth it, the money that we paid for it. So this is the way we work, and it's very unusual. There aren't many companies around the world that do this because inventory-wise it's a bit of a nuisance, and it takes a lot of passion for the product. But all 4 of us started as hobbyists, and we got into the business gradually over time to pay for this expensive hobby that we had. So here we go. Let's talk about it. So this book, I just noticed there's a first edition copy at the back that is owned by the library. This book is now published in 6 languages. It's won World's Best Tea Book twice. It's also won the Canadian Culinary Awards. It's published, and it's a bestseller in Russia and in Korea also. And you can see the old copy over there, or you can pick up a copy in bookshops around town. So let's get started. History. So tea has over 5,000 years of history, and we often hear when tea is mentioned that it is the most consumed beverage on the planet after water. This is definitely true. I've seen the statistics. When we put, if we think the population of China and the population of India both drink a lot of tea every day, already we're moving pretty into some comfortable statistics. But when we look at the statistics on a graph, the next things that start coming in are beer, wine, coffee. These kind of drinks are shadowed by the amount of tea that is being consumed on the planet. Over 5,000 years ago, back in China, this chap, Shennong, sometimes noted as Emperor Shennong, he is the father of animal husbandry, a lot of Chinese farm practice, and also Chinese herbalism. So he is said to be, back in legend, the person that discovered tea for the first time. So the legend, which is very nice, little legend, he's in the forest, and he's drinking hot water, as you do in the forest, and a leaf falls into his cup, and he tries the water with the leaf in it, and he noticed this beautiful fragrance, and he noticed that it stimulates his body while it stimulates his mind while it soothes his body. So we know this isn't true for a few different reasons. Any leaf falling off a tea plant is going to be an old leaf that would be bitter. If you put a leaf directly off the plant into water, it doesn't give any taste. There's certain manufacturing techniques we have to go through. And one leaf would not be enough to give any flavor of any kind to a tea. I mean, you can imagine putting one little piddly tea leaf in a cup of hot water. It would barely change the color. So it's a nice story. Like most legends, the history of tea sort of fades off into this kind of legendary story. As time moved on, we'd started to develop different ways to make tea taste better. At the beginning, the very first reports that we had were that it was being put in soups and in broth with onions and ginger to hide the taste. Because if you don't make tea in a very specific way, it's quite bitter and hard to drink. So over time, farm practice and cultivation, and then the transformation techniques that they make the finished product with, were all developed over time, and tea became gradually the delicious beverage that we have today. So I should clarify, first of all, I am specialized in one particular plant, and everything I'm going to talk about today is this plant. We often use the word tea, because tea has been such a popular beverage. We often use the word tea for any old leaf that we put in hot water and sit down and drink. The activity has become called tea. We often sit and drink chamomile or mint or something like that. That's not tea. Tea is an actual plant. And the botanical name of the plant is Camellia Sinensis, which is the name of our company, because that's what we specialize in. So within this Asian plant, There are about 80 different camellias and many, many different varieties. So those of you that are gardeners, you might know there are some camellias that grow here in Canada. Not that many, but it's a vast, vast family of flowering bushes. So tea is one of them. Camellia sinensis. Now, in the varieties of Camellia sinensis that we have, there are two that are used for making tea. One is the Camellia sinensis, and the other one is the Camellia sinensis assamica. And this photo shows the two growing one next to the other, and you can see that one has a small leaf and one has a much larger leaf. The small leaf is the variety that has evolved for use up in the mountains. It grows slowly, and it gives, generally speaking, gives more aromatics and a little bit more of a complex flavor profile. The other one, with the large leaf, is a jungle plant. It gives way, way more leaf per plant, grows in the greenhouse situation of jungle planting, gives 3 times as much leaf as the other plant, and is generally used, large generally, for the type of tea that we would have in tea bags. It's more the commodity plant because it gives way more yield and it has a more simple flavor. When we make commodity teas, we take simple flavored teas from around the world and we mix them together. So these are the two plants that I'm going to talk about today. Tea production around the world, there's a lot of different places growing tea, and there are actually a few that are not on this map yet. We can see where the quality area is. China, which is the mothership. All the tea comes from China or just on its borders. The botanical source of the original ethnobotanical origins of tea is in that area, in the big rivers between Burma and southwestern China. That is where tea first began its life. And then, so that area, China, Nepal, India, Japan, Vietnam, Korea, Taiwan, is where almost all of the good quality tea in the world is made. The type of tea that we can buy it from the garden and it's ready to drink. We don't have to mix it, we don't have to add anything, it's just ready. Then, as time went on and this became a very popular beverage, traders during the colonial era started bringing tea to other places to grow it as a commodity. So the Brits took it to India and Sri Lanka. Iran started growing it rather than buying it from China. Turkey started growing it. East Africa got planted by the British, the Germans. And then South America started to be planted. Some of these places are producing enormous amounts of tea, and we never hear about them because their teas go into blends. So if we're buying an English breakfast, if we're buying Twinings English breakfast tea, that has 17 different teas in it, mixed together, from 17 different origins. It's got Kenya, Sri Lanka, Assam, all mixed together. So if I work for Twinings as a taster, rather than being a sort of out in the field hunter for the best batch, I would be in the laboratory putting these things together, test batching different teas together so that my tea always tasted exactly the same. They can't risk when they're putting their packets on the shelves to have a tea that tastes different to the last time, because that's when people start saying, yeah, you know, my tea doesn't taste like it used to, and that's when they start losing customers. They have to have it the same all the time. So I'm in a very opposite little weird corner of the market where it tastes different every single time. Very different kind of a thing. But most people, that's what they're making, and most of the tea produced is going into some form of a blend. Argentina produce almost all the tea for North American iced tea. So when you have Nestea in the fridge in in the dépanneur, that's probably Argentinian tea. Turkey are a massive producer. They drink almost all their own tea. Not meant you never see it outside. Kenya and Tanzania are making enormous amounts of tea again for all the other blends that we're drinking, like King Cole if you come from out east. So let's have a little look about the through the gardens. One thing that's very interesting when you travel around the world for tea is that every country has a long, long history, and they all do it a bit differently. The gardens look different. The way they produce it is different. The way they drink it is different. Some of them have ceremonies around the way that they pour it. Other ones will be much more industrial about it. Some of them you don't talk about business until the third meeting. There's a lot of different things that happen in the different countries. But as you'll see, even the gardens look very different. Here we're in Anji in China, and this is an old school, old style planting where the plants are quite far apart with quite a lot of space, and there's a lot of free land in between each garden. This is the area, for those that saw Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, this is the area that grows the bamboo where they have the floating fight in the top of the bamboo. So let's move to Japan. Japan is a bit more science fiction. They've mechanized everything because their labor is very, very expensive in Japan. It's very expensive to pay people to do the plucking. So instead, they've made these gardens, and they look like perfect lawns where they can run machines over the top, and then they do very careful sorting to pull out all the best leaves. So rather than sorting while they pluck the tea, they sort once it's in the place, in the factory. Here we're in Darjeeling, enormous garden. This garden has 10,000 people working in it. It's enormous. And it's 38 degrees and raining when I took this video. Here we are in Rwanda. Rwanda growing a lot of commodity style tea. This is a cooperative of 9,300 farmers that all work in this valley. And they were operating in a slightly different way, where they bring the leaf into the factory at the end of the day and sell the green leaf to the factory. So the factory is a separate unit. The co-op grow and bring the tea in, and then the factory pays them and then manufactures it and takes it to market. So plucking. The first thing we have to do after we've got the garden ready, cultivated, waiting for the teas to start growing in the spring, the first thing we're going to do is pluck the tea. Now, if you look at this stem, this is a stem that I photographed in Assam, you can see that on the left-hand side of the stem, if you follow the big stem down the center, there's a leaf that hasn't even opened yet, and that is the bud. So the bud is the potential of a leaf, but it hasn't done any photosynthesis yet. It's just all this nice genetics that are waiting to open up and start performing as a leaf. If you see the leaf that's next to it that still has furled edges, this leaf has started to have a bit of sunlight and is slowly starting to develop the fibers that will open it up, the leathery surface that will protect it from too much of the elements, and it started to go a little bit greener. If we go to the next stem down, the next one on the stem, which is down, you can see this is starting to get more rigid. It's got a nice stalk down the center of it. The fibers have opened it up almost into its final shape, and it's becoming more solid. The last one down here is quite a full leaf. It's been growing for probably a couple of weeks, 3 weeks maybe, and it's becoming quite leathery and quite rigid. So that's been doing a lot of photosynthesis. So what happens is, as we go down, the leaves become more and more bitter. So this is why I'm saying, when Sheng Nung's sitting in the forest, if a leaf got old enough to fall off the tree, it's going to have been there for a good long while. It's going to be bitter as anything. If we move really far down, we're making teas that have a really bitter flavor. So the higher quality we do, we're moving into the bud and the first leaf. That's where the first quality is. Sometimes the second leaf too. So that's where we're getting the very finest quality. If we want to drink the tea as is, without adding it or mixing it or anything, that's what we're looking for. So you can imagine, if I say to my team, today we're just going to pick buds. So they're going to come in with a small little bag like this at the end of the day, but they're going to be expecting to earn the same amount of money at the end of the day. So per kilogram, I have to pay more money for that little kilo. So immediately we can see every single action we do in the process is going to have some kind of financial impact on the price of the end product. So this is why the smaller we pluck, the higher the price is to cost-wise. So let's have a look. This is some plucking going on in China. You can see she's taking just the bud and the first leaf. This is beautiful plucking, the type that you pay a lot of money for. And she's also plucking when the shoots have just come out. They're like 2 or 3 days old. And you'll notice, look at that beautiful leaf. So she's not going to have a lot in the end of the basket at the end of the day. She's going to be paid a handsome price for that. And you can see that she's only taking the very, very top stems, and all the other leaves, they rest on the tree to keep it in good health. This is Japanese version, scooting over the top with a kind of a mower. And this is the handheld version, but we also have ones that look like tractors that drive across the what we call the plucking table. So, having thought about this, it's quite fascinating how many different flavors we can get out of the leaf once we bring it in. So, if we're thinking about the idea of green tea, white tea, black tea, perhaps some of you have tried oolong teas, perhaps some of you have tried pu'er teas, aged teas. All these come from the same plant. As I said, chamomile and mint, those are other plants. I could do a talk like this just about chamomile and chamomile culture and so on. But we're sticking to the one plant today. So if I can get all these flavors, all these flavor notes out of a leaf, how can that be? How can all these different styles of tea come from one plant? What are the main differences when I'm making the tea that are going to give me this difference? This is the difference. Oxidation is what makes the big difference. So oxidation is like cutting an apple into pieces for the kids, and the kids don't eat them. They just run outside, and the apple goes brown on the plate, and so you take a bite because it seems a shame to waste it, and you notice that the apple has changed flavor. When you were cutting it, you ate a little piece, and now you're eating another one half an hour later, and it's browned, but the flavor has changed. So this is oxidation, and we use it in a very controlled way to make all these different kinds of teas. So oxidation, I need 3 things to be present to have oxidation. First one, oxygen in the air. The second one is moisture, the juice inside the apple. And the third one is active enzymes. So in every living thing, we have the active enzymes that will start to turn things brown once they're broken. The things that start to turn things back into compost. We're full of them too. Every living thing has it. And it's what returns us back to the earth when it's over. So we need to have these three things. If I take out any one of these, I'm going to stop the oxidation process. So when I cut open the apple, which has a protective skin to stop this happening, I'm then exposing the enzymes and the moisture to the oxygen in the air. So what we do this in a leaf way, what we do is we let the leaf wither a little bit. We let it leave it overnight so some of the moisture escapes and it becomes a little wilted. And then we roll it, which breaks the exterior membrane of the leaf, and it starts to go brown. So you can imagine in our own lives something that would be like this is if I pick some herbs from the garden, some basil maybe, and I take a big handful of basil, rub it in my hands. Firstly, all that lovely aromatic oil comes out. My hands smell great. And that's me breaking the surface of the leaf. Then I take that little lump of leaves and I leave it on the counter, on the plate with the apple, and it starts to go brown. Imagine that? So that's oxidation. That's what we do to tea to make that happen. So if we go back to our styles of tea, black tea is that process done to the fully oxidized state. So we let it go really dark, and then we dry it, and we take out the moisture. Because I need these three things. If I don't have moisture, if I dry the tea, then I'm going to stop that process. Oolong means that I do it for a little while, but not completely. So there are lots of different styles of tea in the oolong family. Some of them are almost green teas, and some of them are almost black teas. Many things to explore in that family. Green tea, what I do is, when I bring the green leaf in from the field, the very first thing I do is I apply heat. And with heat of a certain temperature, I can kill the enzymes in the leaf. So it becomes sterile and will remain green. So in that way, the thing I have removed is the active enzymes. So it will stay green whatever I do to it. So that's how I make green tea. And there are two ways to make green tea with this heat. One is done with dry heat, and one is done with steam. So the two most common types of tea that we know are Chinese green tea and Japanese green tea. And one of them tastes sort of grassy, maybe nutty, and maybe a bit floral. That's Chinese style because it's done with dry heat when they kill the enzymes. Japanese style, they do it with steam. So Japanese tea tastes like seaweed and spinach and steamed vegetables, steamed green vegetables. So that's the main difference between those two types of tea, is that difference in the process. White tea is mainly just the little buds. So white teas often cost a little more because of the plucking, and it's often just the buds or just the bud and the first leaf. And they're very, very simply dried in air with nothing else done. That's why they're so light in the cup. They don't have a lot of color because they're not really oxidized. They're just dried in air. And aged tea, which is another unusual style, for those of you that might have tried it, aged tea is like a green tea that has been rehumidified and has bacterial cultures in it that help it to age. So it's very nice for your stomach. So a lot of Chinese doctors prescribe it for anything to do with metabolism or anything to do with digestion. Yellow tea is almost not worth mentioning, but there's so little yellow tea on the planet. But basically, you make a green tea, and then when it comes out of the dryer, when it's hot, you wrap it, either in paper or in cotton, and it gets sweaty. And the effect it has is it's a little bit like if you buy fries from the restaurant and you bring them home in a box, they kind of lose their charm because the heat of them has been sweating in the box. So we can use this nasty thing in a very controlled environment, and we can make tea turn yellow. It turns yellow, it gives a yellow infusion in the cup, and that's how we make yellow tea. But it's barely worth knowing about because it's so rare, and there's not very much of it on the planet, and very few people know how to do it. So that's oxidation. I'm going to go quickly through some pictures. Here we are. This is pan firing. So he's got a hot pan, he's got fresh leaves in the hot pan, killing the enzymes, making sure that that tea doesn't go brown. This is the Japanese version, putting leaves into a machine, this is a Chinese version of the same thing, where you do it in a machine, which is basically like a big drum with a heated exterior, a heated interior, and the leaves go into this drum, and a fin system propels them from one end to the other. And they come out like that. This is Japanese. This is a steaming box, and we can change the flavor of the tea by how long they spend in the steam. So Japanese have a series of different sub-styles of sencha, depending on how long it's been steamed for. So it could be a long steam, which is called a fukamushi sencha, or a short steam, which is called an asamushi sencha. Yellow tea, wrapping it up for Christmas. Oolong tea, where we partially wound the tea so that it doesn't make it into a black tea, but it rounds off just a little bit of the flavor, and we can use it in this style in Taiwan to get those beautiful floral bouquets that we get from Taiwanese oolongs. This is oxidation to make black tea, sometimes covered, like on the right-hand side in China, and sometimes open, like in Darjeeling here. Aged tea is a whole other ball game that I don't have time to get into today, but we can maybe do another session on that. And flavored teas. So flavored teas, there are all sorts of different styles. Flavored teas, we have good and bad, just as we have in every sort of product. We have those where we take it to an art form, very popular in France, where they take the tea and they blend it in a sort of chef perfumery situation where they add different types of natural fruits and flowers and so on to make a final product. And other places where at the bottom of the spectrum they take one tea and they just spray it with different artificial flavors. So there's everything in between. The one on the left is a chai tea. Chai is specifically a flavored tea which is with spices. So there are a lot of different chais on the market, very popular in India, introduced in India in the 1920s, actually by the British, when they started encouraging the domestic market to start buying tea, having had an export product until that point. Different infusion techniques, again, this is something we could talk about for a long time. There are three main parameters. One is the dose, which is the amount of tea you put per water. The second one is the temperature of the water. And the third one is the time of the infusion. So just as my oxidation parameters, all of these can be stretched and moved to give you different results. So the same tea will give you different flavors at different temperatures. You probably notice when you make your tea a bit too cold, it tastes funny. Or if you make it a bit too hot, it also has a different flavor. Certainly, if you leave it too long, you know what difference that makes. Sometimes it's quite a nice surprise. Or if you don't put enough in, if you don't have that much left, so you just put what you have and it's not quite as much as you usually put, and it doesn't taste quite as much. So this can be played with enormously to the point that there are actually ways to get to do very, very short infusions to explore the tasting notes of a tea. So you can see with these three on the right, these are Japanese, Chinese, Taiwanese, and pure China, different variations of doing infusion techniques where we do little 30-second infusions of a lot of leaf with very little water. And so we cut down our 3-minute infusion, 3 or 4 minute teapot infusion, and we use the same amount of water, but we make the tea 1 cup at a time. And every cup, because the chemistry of the tea, we have over 30,000 different chemicals in our tea. It's made up of all sorts of different things. So all that different beautiful chemistry that gives the flavor of tea, it all comes out at different speeds into the water. So 3 to 4 minutes is a pretty good average to get everything. But if we just want to taste the stuff that comes into the water quickly, in 30 seconds, we've got a pretty good idea. And then if we do another infusion of 30 seconds, it's going to taste quite different because some of that's already rinsed out and is not there anymore. And then in our second slice of 30 seconds, we've got other stuff that's just starting to infuse into the water. So we use this when we want to taste tea rather than just drink tea. Health benefits, we're always hearing about the health benefits of tea. The list of health benefits for tea is so enormous, I couldn't get it on 3-4 screens. There are so many benefits. There are a lot of parts of Asia where they call tea their partner plant. If you need more of this or more of this or more of this, there are certainly specific plants, spices, roots where we can find more of a specific thing. But if you want to find the Flintstones multivitamin for the human condition, it's pretty hard to beat tea. It's got a little bit of everything in it. And if you're drinking tea every day, this is why people have been drinking it for 5,000 years, even when it tasted horrible at the beginning, because it improved their day, made them feel good, stimulated their mind, helped them get to work, and they also noticed that it helped them to live longer, that the people in the village consuming tea were the ones that had the longest lives. So it's not for nothing. Both, yes. Which is actually a very good point, because if you're drinking fresh leaf or you're drinking tea bags, it's still a pretty noble product. In fact, in our company, one of the things we do in our initiation session with staff is we're very vigilant on the idea that we don't diss other people's tea, because it's all the beautiful plant. It's all got this noble partnership with the human condition, and whether the flavor is this or this, whether the budget is this or this, it's all the same plant. And it's all good for you. It's going to improve your day. It's going to improve your life. And most of the tea from the big companies that's in the tea bags is actually just a leaf that's been cut and dried. There's nothing bad about it. It's just good stuff. So the reason we really are strong with the staff about this is because if you start putting down other people's tea, you're putting down either their budget or their tasting capacity or their flavor preference. So yeah, we do spend a lot of time chasing the top stuff, the rare stuff that some master made on a mountaintop in lost China that we had to spend 7 hours in a truck to drive to get it. We do a lot of that stuff. But it's all tea, and it's all good for us. Coffee, I can't say anything about. Don't get me started. No. But I can tell you, interesting thing, because both of the coffee and tea are our two most popular caffeinated beverages. So, I'll just take a sip of this. So our two main caffeinated beverages, coffee and tea. The caffeine in coffee is delivered very, very quickly into our body. It goes into our bloodstream very quickly. You probably noticed, if those of you that drink coffee. It's very quick, but it's also removed from our systems very quickly. You can imagine it's coming in, it's in a bean form, in oil, and your digestive system takes it through through osmosis very quickly. Tea is released very slowly into your body. You could have the same amount of caffeine in the cup, but your spike from caffeine could be as little as 20 minutes, and your caffeine from the tea could be up to 5 hours, which is why a lot of people stop drinking tea at a certain point of the day, because it keeps them awake late at night. I can drink tea till the end of the day, and I meet people every day that drink tea until they go to bed, and they have no problem. It's very, very varied among people, and it can change, and it can depend on the day. It can depend what you've eaten, what it's in there with. It can depend whether you're sick or tired or stressed. All those things can affect the way that your intestines are going to absorb this product. The other thing that we have with tea, which is different and coffee doesn't have, is we have a very special amino acid that most of us really enjoy in tea and didn't even know about. It's an amino acid, and it's called L-theanine. And L-theanine is the chemical in tea, naturally occurring chemical in tea, that soothes our body, reduces anxiety, and gives us that feeling of well-being when we drink tea. So that's actually a chemical thing. So when something happens and things are going wrong, or your friend comes around crying and something's happening, first thing we do is put the kettle on, because we know that if we make tea, it'll make everyone feel okay. So tea has always been associated with that, but it's actually a chemical thing. So I think I'm going to finish there, and we can move to some questions. I think that's good for timing. Yes, perfect. That's good.